So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Freddie Perez, and I'm the Associate for Community Outreach at the Paralysis Resource Center of the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. Thank you for joining us today in our webinar, Supporting the Paralysis Community of Rural America. In November, we highlight National Rural Health Month, and as a way to bring more attention to the rural health issues and its intersection with folks living with paralysis, we invited stakeholders and service professionals from the paralysis communities of Idaho, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Vermont, and West Virginia. All these folks work with the paralysis community, so just for everyone to be aware. First and foremost, I'd also like to say that I hope you and your families and communities are doing well during these times. Today's webinar will cover a short presentation on the free programs and services the Paralysis Resource Center offers, and we will also have an opportunity to hear from our keynote provided by Lisa Mathis, lead consultant at the Job Accommodation Network. The goal for this event is to share with fellow stakeholders that support and are involved in the world of paralysis how the Paralysis Resource Center can help your communities. In addition, our keynote serves to provide information about how they may be of assistance as a community support. We are excited to share information, and we hope that you leave this webinar with additional resources and support that you can take back to your organization, communities, and other networks. With that being said, let's get started. Paralysis Resource Center at the Christopher Dana Reeve Foundation promotes the health, well-being, and independence of people living with paralysis, spinal cord injury, or other mobility impairment. We are a free, comprehensive, national source of informational support for people living with paralysis, their families, and their caregivers. Our primary goals are to foster involvement in the community, promote health, and improve the overall quality of life. I would also like to add that all of this is possible with the support of the Administration for Community Living. Since 2002, the PRC has provided resources, programs, and services that enable people living with paralysis to live independently. As a base starter, in 2013, the Christopher Dana Reeve Foundation unveiled statistics on research based into the prevalence of paralysis across the United States. According to the study, there are nearly 1 in 50 Americans living with paralysis, or approximately 6 million people. Of that 6 million, 1.3 million are living with spinal cord injury. As many of you are aware, paralysis is dramatically more widespread than what was once previously thought. Each year around the world, between 250,000 and 500,000 people sustain a spinal cord injury. So with that being about the Paralysis Resource Center, I would like to bring our attention to our first program, support. Our information specialists provide customized support and answer paralysis-related questions. What's important are the following 3 bits of information. You can reach out to us online, via phone call or email. Our IS team assists people as they move through the various stages of their injury or their life. And we have assisted over 100,000 families to date. And we offer multilingual resources that include language interpreters for phone calls and translation services for print and web in over 170 languages. So please, if you can, take a picture of this screen to give us a call or get in touch with us. Thank you. As many of you are aware, there are a number of different conditions that can cause paralysis. The slide represents many of the conditions our information specialists can assist with. Of course, while Christopher Reeve's injury put a spotlight on spinal cord injury, that is not the only condition that we serve. I will also add that the leading causes of paralysis based on our findings were stroke, followed by spinal cord injury, and then multiple sclerosis. So on this journey, you will have many questions. PRC recognizes how important it is for families to find answers to their questions. It can be an overwhelming time. You feel like the room is spinning. I remember when I first started the Paralysis Resource Center, staff members would tell me the story of how when Chris got injured, it felt like his whole family were transported to a whole new world. They had to go to several different doctors, specialists, organizations to find answers to their questions. The Paralysis Resource Center was Dana Reeve's vision as the go-to place of support for families who had similar questions, who needed the support, and who were looking for someone to tell them that there is a future ahead of this journey. Some of the questions that we regularly receive are, what should I be looking for in a rehabilitation program? What are the body changes and health conditions that one should expect as they age? Or how can I learn more about home modifications? Know that our information specialist team stands ready to assist and help answer any paralysis-related questions you may have. Additionally, our information specialists can provide fact sheets that are updated regularly to include information and services on paralysis topics, as well as state and international resources. These fact sheets are critical sources of information that can further educate individuals about their health, their journey, and their new normal. At the moment, we also have a COVID-19 fact sheet, which is available in 9 languages. So I recommend you all to check out our website at www.christopherreeve.org. Another example of how our IS team would be able to offer support is through our free materials and resources. The Paralysis Resource Center is known for its many educational materials and publications. Our goal is to keep individuals, families, and professionals well informed on topics that are important to the paralysis community. Of course, when we think about these materials, we think of the Paralysis Resource Guide, a general guidebook for living a healthy, active, and independent life. However, this is only one of many resources available to our community. We have our wallet cards, which allow folks to carry critical information on their person regarding autonomic dysreflexia, deep vein thrombosis, and sepsis. These handy wallet cards provide life-saving information those staffing ENT units, emergency rooms, and other health centers need to best treat you. There are a variety of topics that we have publications on, including pain management, women's mental health after paralysis, and parenting with paralysis, to name a few. I would also like to add that these publications, wallet cards, and books are available for free. If you are interested in receiving them, please reach out to me or our information specialist team, and we can have them shipped to you. I would like to read this quote from Eileen. Even after 20 years of living with a spinal cord injury, I still had questions that my primary or rehabilitation doctor could not answer. I used the Reeve Foundation website and forums for answers. I have also called the information specialist on various occasions. I want to note that Eileen has been coming to the PRC for 20 years now and is a prime example of how no matter where you are in your journey, the PRC can help. Our Peer Family Support Program is the second program that we'll talk about today. Individuals living with paralysis can feel overwhelmed and sometimes alone. Reeve peer mentors provide support, emotional as well as resourceful, to members of their community, their families, and caregivers. People who have unique experiences and have the done this, done that sort of stories can help people's adjustment to their new normal. We match people with similar levels of paralysis and or experience. We offer caregiver mentoring too. Our peer mentors are certified and trained, and currently we have over 440 certified peer mentors who are living with paralysis. And we also have helped 12,000 people receive support, covered 42 states, and have logged in more than 19,000 encounters. For more information, please visit our website, www.christopherreeve.org/peer. On this journey, our community can help with practical experience. These are some of the most common questions we hear from our community who are seeking advice from our peer mentors. Who did you use in your town for home modification services? And what were your experiences when hiring a personal care assistant? And have you ever tried the local public transportation? Is it accessible? The program allows for very little to high amounts of communication. People can choose to meet in whatever platform is most comfortable to them. And if there's only one question they need help with, we can take care of that as well. Here we have Brooke and Ashley. Prior to having a mentor, I had a difficult time expressing my feelings to my family and friends. They could not fully understand the grief that I was feeling after my accident. Ashley is able to relate to me in certain ways my family and friends just couldn't. Ashley knows how to encourage me, which makes accepting life with paralysis and learning to move forward much easier. When Brooke was injured, she reached out to the Peer and Family Support Program and was paired with Ashley and have been friends for over 2 years now. Ashley has been an important support to Brooke as she goes through life living with paralysis. In your communities, if your communities are seeking a similar support, please feel free to reach out to me and I can connect with you, the program manager. Our third program, the Quality of Life Grants Program, strives to empower individuals with paralysis and their families. We provide grants to nonprofit organizations that improve quality of life through inclusion, access, independence, opportunity for community engagement, and other life-enhancing endeavors for people with paralysis. In addition, today we have funded 3,153 programs nationwide, awarding over $28 million. For more information, please visit www.christopherreeve.org/QOL. I have been fortunate enough to witness some great projects funded in the last year, most recently having the opportunity to see the real world impact an accessible playground can have for children and what that means for the development and inclusion within society. I have witnessed the difference it makes having a wheelchair accessible van that can transport patients to and from the rehabilitation appointments. The importance of community centers and camps to be inclusive and accessible. The creation of a disaster preparedness program for an independent living center in Puerto Rico. These are just some of the many examples of programmatic efforts we have funded in the past. On this journey, grants for nonprofits exist to address the needs of people living with paralysis in their communities. Some of the questions that we've been asked regarding those interested in applying include who can apply for quality of life grants, what are the different types of grants available, and what are some project examples that the Quality of Life Grant Program has funded in previous years, which I just listed a few. I do recommend visiting our website to visit the different types of grants that we have available and also their deadlines. Meet Edna. Edna utilized the PRC and the PRG to educate her on what to expect while living with paralysis. Once home, Edna found herself retraining the caregivers herself, teaching them to cook, to do laundry, and different ways to bathe and transfer her. She realized there was a gap in training in Ohio where hands-on training for home health aides was not required. She applied for a Quality of Life grant, which helped her establish the Compassion's Training and Awareness Center, which focused on proper caregiver training. She has received a total of 3 grants and trained over 600 caregivers. Most recently, this Compassion Center has moved into a new location with a functional kitchen, living room, and bathroom designed for training as well. The Military and Veteran Initiative. Our Military and Veteran Initiative supports all military service members no matter what era they served in. Injury does not need to be combat related. We focus on providing tailored information and referral services that will help guide service members through the military and veterans healthcare systems. We also do outreach to military treatment facilities and VA medical centers. We strive to connect servicemen, women, and their families with the Peer and Family Support Program for an added layer of support. In addition, 46% of Quality of Life grant recipients reported that their projects served military or veterans with paralysis. For more information, please visit our website. The Paralysis Resource Center also works to build education around self-advocacy efforts. We work on educating policymakers on paralysis-related issues. We participate in coalitions and work to improve public policy. Our policy team works to build grassroots support and engagement, and through our Advocate for Change program, you can lend your voice to the Reeve Foundation and make a difference for people living with paralysis. Most recently, we have worked to advocate for a better understanding of COVID-19 and its impact on people living with paralysis, advocating for the rights of travelers, employment rights, and work to persevere, protect, and improve issues around accessibility and civil rights, among more. To combat isolation and foster peer connections, we have interactive spaces for families impacted by paralysis to share their thoughts, ask a question, and view educational content. We have educational videos on our YouTube channel where you can find videos that cover dental care, adaptive tools for independence, employment, etc. We often have webinars and Facebook Live sessions. Our social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook are updated regularly to showcase upcoming events and other important dates. We have paralysis-related blogs with coverage stories from our community and staff, updates on the PRC. We have a section on COVID-19, relationships, and more topics. And lastly, our online community, Reeve Connect. Our resource map is a great tool to identify resources in your community. Visit our homepage and you'll find the resource map titled Resource in Your Area. You can then type in your zip code and it will populate based off that zip code. The resources available are relevant to the needs of the paralysis community. We also highlight organizations who have been recipients of our Quality of Life grants and those who have applied as well. Lastly, our online community, Reeve Connect, is a platform for people to use to discuss a variety of topics. As you can see on this slide, we have some forums underway with a focus on the new normal, newly paralyzed, health and wellness, and relationships. We also did launch a Reeve Connect group, which is focused for Spanish speakers, and we had a new moderator to come join us over the summer as well. So if you're a Spanish speaker or know anyone who is a Spanish speaker living with paralysis or who has a family or friend who are living with paralysis, they can join as well. Please visit our website at www.christopherreeve.org/community. And I would just like to finish off by saying this following quote. Here is an ordinary individual who finds the strength to persevere and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles. Here at the Paralysis Resource Center, we stand ready to assist your communities in any way we can. Again, I'd like to reiterate, please visit our website, www.christopherreeve.org, to learn more about the Paralysis Resource Center and discover more of what we have to offer. And now that concludes the first part of this presentation. I am now going to hand this over to Lisa, but I would like to introduce Lisa first. Lisa is joining us this afternoon with her presentation titled Using Jan as Part of Your Accommodation Toolbox in Rural America. And Lisa joined the Motor team as a consultant in February 2011. She is part of the Job Accommodation Network, and Lisa provides one-on-one guidance on workplace accommodations and the Americans with Disabilities Act. She assists employees and employers with understanding their rights and responsibilities under the ADA and in identifying accommodation solutions for employees with motor impairments. Lisa also presents on the ADA and accommodation issues at various national conferences and provides specialized trainings to JAN audiences and advocacy groups. Lisa graduated from West Virginia University with a bachelor's degree in business and a master's of arts in communication studies. And in 2014, she completed the Assistive Technology Application Certificate Program. Lisa, welcome. I am going to stop sharing my screen and we will continue this presentation. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you for having me. So my name's Lisa, and I'm here with the Job Accommodation Network. Just to give you all an idea of the topics we're going to be covering today, I am going to go into more detail of what we do at the Job Accommodation Network, or JAN as many people call us. And then I do quickly want to touch on some ADA basics, just so we're all on the same page of what an employer has to do versus what a person with a disability is entitled to. Then we will get into the interactive process and how service providers can play a role in that process. And then we'll take a closer look at accommodation examples and some situation and solutions that we've dealt with. And then, of course, I will leave some time at the end to address any questions y'all have for me. Okay, so what do we do at JAN? Consultants at JAN, we specialize in answering questions about the federal laws that apply to disability rights. Our primary focus is Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is the employment realm, but we also deal with the Amendments Act and the Rehabilitation Act that applies to federal workers. At JAN, we help our customers resolve accommodation issues and come up with and implement successful accommodations. We do this by providing consultation on all aspects of workplace accommodations for people with disabilities. We try to work with our clients to try and identify possible solutions that can enable people with disabilities or limitations to continue performing their jobs effectively. We can talk employment issues regarding a wide range of medical conditions in any career and try to provide ideas that can be tailored to the specific need or limitation. When you call us, we really don't care about the diagnosis or whether it's truly an ADA disability. We're going to focus on what is the limitation and what is the job task that we're having trouble performing. And let's explore accommodation issues from there. JAN has aided Fortune 500 companies with ADA compliance issues, down to a mom and pop shop that didn't even have enough employees to be covered by ADA, but they were just looking for a product modification. So it's safe to say that we help customers in all industries and all job categories. The best part of JAN has to be that we are a free service. We provide our information free of charge because we are funded by the Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. We're a confidential service. So what we discuss regarding the work environment or disability does stay between us. The program assistants, that frontline staff, they'll answer your call and will ask for your name and disability, but all that information is truly confidential as it stays in-house. And the only reason we ask for it is we can keep track of case notes. So for employers or service providers that have like a tricky ongoing accommodation issue, we can pick up right where we left off if you would call us back. We're a national service, so although there's only one office and we're based here in Morgantown, West Virginia, we do take calls from all over the country and US territories. I feel like Jan is easy to use because whenever you call us, you do get a real person on our end. We're also easy to use because whatever way you want to contact us, we probably use it. We're very accessible. All the services are done electronically, and were even before COVID. So phone, email, chat, website, and we're available on social media platforms as well. So we run the gamut of who we talk to. Our biggest portion of customers are going to be the employer and individuals with disabilities. But like I said, we talk to service providers, medical providers, friends, family members, coworkers, EEOC investigators. We really talk to anybody. Okay, so we have an extensive website on askjan.org. On the website, you'll see a running list of A to Z lists with these 5 subsections. So depending on what information you have as a service provider, you could find information on accommodations. So if you know the disability or the limitation or what job task we're trying to accommodate, you can go straight to those tabs. And then the by topic page has various topics such as legal resources or general topics like parking or leave. And then the 5th one, the accommodation tab, that has definitions for each type of accommodation. Some accommodations have longer publications that are linked. So really the A to Z page is where I encourage all users to start and look through those tabs for accommodation information. Next, you'll see on the slide, we also have these practical guidances for the employee and the employer, where it's a summary of common issues that people have when requesting accommodations, and then it explains how to address them appropriately. Again, on the JAN website, we have multiple resources for even more information on ADA and Rehab Act, the ADA library, where we link the most comprehensive publications and EEOC guidances straight from the enforcing agency. There's sample policies on the page, along with the contact information to those enforcing agencies. And then last bullet, we have the interactive process. We're getting into that today, but I do have 3 publications for the interactive process, one for the private sector, one for federal, and one for service providers specifically. So we can be pretty busy here at JAN. Just last year, we had over 50,000 contacts of people calling us, emailing, or submitting questions using our JAN On Demand feature, also using the live chat feature on our website. And then we also, in addition to that, we had over 18 million people who just visited the website. So for being a small office in West Virginia, we really do take a lot of inquiries. Whenever I was still traveling, a lot of people didn't even know that we had live consultants on staff. They just thought we were a web page that fed this database of accommodations. They didn't know they could get one-on-one consultation. So definitely call us if you need accommodation help. We also have a quarterly newsletter so people can keep up with the different accommodation topics or new changes in ADA. And then we also offer our services in Spanish. So you can view our website in Spanish, or you can talk to a Spanish consultant if you would give us a ring. Another large portion of our job is to refer people to the appropriate channel to further assist them. We can refer people to vendors, which could be the manufacturers or distributors of different products or technologies that we may suggest as a possible accommodation solution. We may refer people to an enforcing agency if they feel they need to file a claim of discrimination, which may be your human rights agency or the federal EEOC. We work with other organizations such as disability groups. We have working relationships with various groups where they refer clients to us for accommodation help or vice versa if they need additional information. State programs, that can be a great resource, such as the State Assistive Technology Project. They'll let people borrow or test out AT devices or equipment to see if that's truly what they need before their employer makes the investment. And then lastly, state vocational rehab centers, love them for job seekers. They can help find jobs or further education and training opportunities. And I really like VR for just a local resource. You know, I'm in West Virginia, so someone calling me from New York, I may suggest, you know, run this situation past your voc rehab. They may know of like local resources that can be helpful. And then same goes for the Center of Independent Living, like good for local contacts, and really can help people with disabilities get in touch with the appropriate resources that are available in that area. So we have been at this for over 30 years. So we do strive to be very knowledgeable and stay up to date on new ADA information, the products that are available, assistive technologies, changes in legislature and national workplace trends. Our consultants have a wide variety of backgrounds such as rehab counseling, engineering, law, social work, business, communication, and speech pathology. So looking at the puzzle pieces that encompass JAN as a whole, you'll see that we have 4 teams right now. One team being the sensory, motor, and then cognitive psych is one team, and then the small business team. And we also have ADA and web accessibility specialists on staff. So like Freddie said, I personally do serve on the motor team, so I field calls for a wide range of conditions from paraplegia to cumulative trauma to hip impairments. Then the sensory team, they're the hearing impairments, the vision issues, respiratory and allergy calls. And then the cognitive neurological team, they deal with the mental health impairments such as depression or OCD, various learning disabilities, or even addiction issues. And then lastly, we do have that small self-employment entrepreneurship team that will work with individuals with disabilities to get their business idea off the ground, try to find local funding and all things necessary to start that small business. I did want to highlight a feature of the website, the JAN Workplace Accommodation Toolkit. This provides employers with the tools needed to create a more disability inclusive and compliant workplace. This toolkit has the best and emerging practices in providing accommodations. So there's going to be 3 drawers with information depending on your role. There's the recruiter, manager, and supervisor drawer. There's a drawer geared for accommodation experts and consultants and subject matter experts. And then the last drawer is for people with disabilities and or coworkers, friends, and family. So at JAN, we do have a process that we use and recommend using to assist with the interactive process. It involves these questions to work through based on the individualized situation. So first, what are the limitations involved? This will vary with any disability or medical condition, but we find that breaking down what the specific limitations are can be more beneficial than focusing on a diagnosis. 2 people with the same diagnosis can be impacted in very different ways, so making sure that the focus is on each person's individualized needs. Next, how are these limitations affecting the employee's job performance? Are they having difficulty getting to work on time due to difficulties with sleep, falling behind on deadlines due to issues concentrating? Are there specific tasks that are problematic? Does an employee who had difficulty walking long distances regularly need to use the printer on the other side of the office to do their job effectively? Any of that information that you can gather can assist with looking at what accommodations are available to reduce or eliminate the problems. It can be also important to look at if all possible resources are being used to determine possible accommodation options. Okay, so moving on to ADA basics, I just wanted to remind people or inform people of the general principles of the ADA and accommodations. So Title I of the ADA requires an employer to provide reasonable accommodation to qualified individuals with disabilities who are employees or applicants for employment, unless doing so would cause an undue hardship. So in general, an accommodation is any change in the work environment or in the way things are customarily done that enables an individual with a disability to enjoy equal employment opportunities, whether that is the application interview stage, the performance of essential job functions, or to partake in equal benefits or privileges of employment. So when I get a call from a person with a disability asking what their employer has to do as far as accommodations go, I always explain it's easier to talk about the things employers do not have to do. It's a shorter list. So again, keep in mind that employers are allowed to do these things, but they aren't required to do these things. So first up, they don't have to remove essential functions. Those are those primary fundamental duties of a job role. So if you can't do the essential functions and there's no accommodations that would enable you to perform that function, you may not be qualified to remain in the role. However, at that point, an employer needs to consider reassignment to a job that they can perform. Speaking of reassignment, when reassigning an employee as an accommodation, employers don't have to create new jobs or bump other employees from their jobs to create a vacancy for the person with a disability. Reassignment is for current vacancies or soon to be vacancies. So if we know someone is leaving here by end of month, that should be considered a vacancy for today's purposes. We don't have to lower production standards, whether those are qualitative or quantitative. As long as they're applied uniformly to those with and without disabilities, then you can have those standards. You may have to accommodate a person with a disability to bring them up to meet those standards, but you don't have to lower the standards as an accommodation. Employers don't have to provide personal use items, personal need items. Those are items that are needed on and off the job. The quintessential examples are wheelchairs, medications, prosthetics, glasses, hearing aids. And then lastly, employers don't have to provide an accommodation that poses an undue hardship on the employer. This means that if an accommodation requires significant difficulty or expense to provide, then it may constitute an undue hardship. So looking at the interactive process now, really just that means an employer and a person with a disability working together to come to an effective solution, but the service providers can assist in that process. So the interactive process should be an open dialogue about the disability, limitations, and the job task that we're trying to accommodate. So who's assisting the individual? Really anyone can be active in this process. Here I have listed many of the service providers we see play an integral part of the accommodation process. So the interactive process, it's not even required by the ADA, it's just recommended. So there's not a universal interactive process. This is a sample that they developed at Jan. Some employers have their own process, which is great, but some don't. So this can give those employers a streamlined process that can make it better for all parties. So we suggest a 6-step process that hopefully leads to a successful accommodation. As we go through these steps today, we'll look at real life examples to illustrate each step. So let's get into that. Okay, step 1, making an accommodation request. Typically, an accommodation request is going to be made by the person with a disability. They're probably going to be the ones to realize there's a workplace barrier that's preventing them from performing their job or even applying to the job. There may be times that a family member or a friend or a healthcare professional or other representative may request an accommodation on behalf of that individual. So employees are not required to use special ADA language or terminology, but at Jan, we're going to suggest that each user do that. It kind of gives your request more credibility. But as far as ADA goes, you simply have to let your employer know that you need a change at work because of a medical condition. So this should request the employer to move forward with the request. So some tips here: make sure clients are aware of their rights under the ADA. You want to document the request. So again, although it's not required, putting that request in writing is good. Create that paper trail in case there's a discrepancy about whether you requested something and when you requested something. And be clear and specific. Service providers or the individual can describe specific needs and offer suggestions for accommodation ideas. Although it's not required, it may be helpful to specify that the individual is requesting, quote, a reasonable accommodation under, quote, the ADA. The first example, we have an employee, they've been out of work for 6 months with a workers' comp injury. The employee's doctor sends a letter stating that the employee is released to return to work, but with some work restrictions. Did we make an accommodation request? Yes. So with this note, we understand she's going to need accommodations to overcome these restrictions. We know it's related to a medical condition since it was a workers' comp issue. So employers should kind of use documentation they already have whenever you're moving through this process. Okay, step 2, providing information. Once that accommodation request has been received, the employer may ask relevant questions that will enable them to make an informed decision. Sometimes the disability and accommodation are obvious and no more information is needed, but in other situations, the employer may need documentation of the disability and documentation of the need for accommodation. So to provide effective options, employers need to know what the limitations are that are interfering with job performance and what specific work tasks are an issue. So if that additional information is needed, that's where service providers can get involved to help explain the individual's functional limitations and need for accommodation. A VR counselor may have some insight to what an employee needs to perform a job task. So tips for this would be describe the limitation and problem. To find effective options, employers need to know what limitation is causing the issue. You want to get information from the individual when possible. Individuals with disabilities are familiar with their limitations and often know what accommodations will work best for them. And then, like I mentioned, use ADA language. When providing documentation, service providers may want to use ADA specific language so the information will be helpful for employers. Okay, I did want to show you guys 2 of the more popular publications on the JAN site. I went over the employee's practical guide. This really lays out the employer's obligations to the individual's entitlements and explains the ADA in an easy to understand manner. And then the right is the practical guidance for medical professionals to help write those accommodation letters. It's like Mad Libs where you just plug in the patient's name, plug in the limitations and requested accommodation information. And the template is in a paragraph format, so it makes it super simple to accompany those initial accommodation requests. Both of those are on askjan.org. And then on the flip side, we have these employer resources. I went over the employer's practical guide. The other one I want to talk about is this medical inquiry in response to an accommodation request. So if the need for accommodation and the disability is not obvious, an employer can ask for limited medical documentation. So they can actually give this form to the employee to take back to their doctor, and that really elicits ADA sufficient medical documentation. So there's not universal forms for ADA purposes. So employers, it's kind of, they can willy-nilly create forms, but these forms can help the employers in that interactive process. And those are linked on the A to Z page by topic under medical exams and inquiries. Okay, so back to providing information. In response to a poor performance evaluation, a teacher gave a doctor's note claiming her MS contributed to her performance problems and says she may benefit from an accommodation. Did we provide all the information? No. We know that the employee needs an accommodation to a medical condition, but we don't know what limitations or what the specific problem is. We have no idea what limitations are causing performance problems. There can be a number of different things that can contribute to poor performance. So we have that initial accommodation request, but we should have given more information to show what type of accommodations may be useful. So step 3, exploring accommodation options. Once the employer has identified the individual's limitation that's causing the problem and has identified what the problem is, then the employer is ready to explore effective options. At this step, employers should be open to new ideas and new ways of doing things. So when exploring accommodation options, a service provider such as an ergonomist, they may do a job analysis, which could include an ergonomic eval to assess the work environment and define any potential problems. Some service providers may be able to provide feedback to determine what assistive technology options may be deemed appropriate. So some tips for step 3, keep an open mind. This is the best time to brainstorm and consider what may work. You want to invite the individual to suggest accommodations again. They may have some good accommodation ideas, but may be hesitant to bring them up without prompting. Consult with other service providers. In many instances, it may be necessary for a team of service providers to work together to develop an effective accommodation strategy. And then lastly, use Jan when needed. We're a free national resource, so please do not hesitate to reach out whenever you're trying to come up with some accommodation ideas. Okay, so now we have a social worker with use of only one hand who has requested a work-related assistant to do all her keyboarding for all her case notes for her. So sometimes work-related aids or assistants are appropriate and sometimes they're not. So just because this is the accommodation that was requested doesn't mean an accommodation the employer must provide. Employers have the right to explore other effective options. So how can we figure out what else may work? This is a good time to call Jan. It is our job to help develop alternative accommodation ideas. And again, this requires thinking outside the box. In this specific example, we did suggest that the employee use a combination of speech recognition software for the longer case notes and a one-handed keyboard and a foot pedal mouse for the shorter typing tasks. But what if Jan is available? That would be an ideal time to hop on the website, go to those A to Z listing pages that I went over at the beginning of the slideshow. Okay, so step 4, choosing an accommodation. Once you've explored all the options, the employer gets to choose what accommodation to implement. If there's more than one option, the employer should consider the preference of the person with a disability, but they're not required to do so. Ultimately, it is the employer who gets to choose among effective options. When an individual feels strongly about a certain accommodation, service providers could help the individual develop ideas to try to convince the employer to choose that option. These ideas should focus on how the accommodation will benefit both the individual and the employer by overcoming those limitations and making the individual more productive at work. So if the employer is still hesitant, service providers may be able to suggest a trial period or a temporary accommodation to really showcase that this is a good idea. Some tips service providers can help with when choosing among effective options. You want to explain the decision-making process. You want to let clients know that employers do have the right to choose among effective options in case that employer doesn't choose the client's preferred option. And then justify preferences. Again, if the person feels strongly about a specific accommodation, help them develop a business case of why that would be ideal. Okay, so now we have a customer service rep with diabetes. They had strong body odor that they couldn't reduce until the diabetes was under control. His employer was considering putting up cube walls and an air purifier in his cube area. The job could be done from home, but the employer was concerned about isolating the employee. Okay, so I do tell employers, you don't want to force isolation to people with disabilities. You want to be mindful of dignity issues when you're choosing accommodations. So are cube walls and this air purifier going to draw more negative attention, or what does the person with a disability, feel on this? So it's something to think about. Have that conversation with the employees of what they want, what they prefer. So the person with a disability, the employee, they often know what will work and what they need from the start. They may have dealt with this in a previous job. They may have, dealt with this if it was a lifelong disability. They may have the answers, but they're just hesitant to talk to their boss about it, hesitant to talk to HR. So us as service providers should kind of encourage that communication. So the solution for this, the employee said, I like the idea of telework. He felt that the cube wall drew negative attention and he expressed his preference. I don't feel isolated if I would be able to work at home. No big deal. Okay, so we chose what accommodations. Now we have to implement. This is where service providers can help train the individuals on how to use an assistive device or piece of software. When equipment is involved, service providers can help properly install the equipment and train the person on how to use it. In some cases, an individual may need continued support while adjusting to an accommodation, such as a job coach or a work-related assistant during that implementation stage. Service providers can also provide feedback on the effectiveness of the accommodation once it's in place. So service providers, some tips, provide assistance in setting up and training on equipment and devices, and provide that support to the individual who may need help adjusting. And you want to continue communication with the client while implementing the accommodation to help ensure success. Okay, so now we have a secretary with a voice disorder. She had difficulty speaking for long periods of time. Her employer purchased her a text-to-speech communication device with phone connectivity. So the employer got her a text-to-speech device. How can a service provider help? It may need customized to meet the person's preferences. Were there instructions involved? Integration with the company phone or computer software. A service provider may need to bridge the gap of compatibility issues with the company database and this new text-to-speech. Okay, an important but often forgotten part of the interactive process is monitoring accommodations after they're in place. In some cases, an accommodation stops being effective for various reasons, such as the individual's limitations change, workplace equipment changes, the job changes, the workplace itself changes, or the accommodation starts to pose an undue hardship to the employer. So because changes occur, employers may need to revisit accommodations. If an accommodation is not working as anticipated, service providers may be able to provide additional assistance or suggestions for alternatives. They can also assist when equipment or technology needs routine maintenance or updating. Sometimes software companies release new versions of its software. An assistive technology specialist can help the individual learn how to use that new and updated version. In situations where reassignment was necessary, service providers can provide information to the employer about any accommodation suggestions or recommendations for that new role. So some tips: check on effectiveness. As things change in the workplace, accommodations may need to change. So service providers may want to routinely check in on the effectiveness for their clients. You want to make sure that the individual can troubleshoot basic problems with equipment or devices and knows who to contact when products are not working properly. And then for any workplace issue, ongoing communication is the key to success. The same is true for accommodations. Individuals should be encouraged to communicate any issues they have with their accommodations before performance problems arise. So now we have an auditor with progressive vision loss from macular degeneration. They started using screen reading software a year ago. Recently, the employer purchased a new database software only to find out that the employee's screen reading software wouldn't work with the new database. Could we have avoided this issue? Of course. So when an employer decides to upgrade or buy new equipment and products, you want to take a look at the current accommodations that are in place. Employees may need to explain how their current accommodation will now need to be modified to align with the new equipment or products. So if you go to the publication and articles tab on the homepage, you will find this interactive process for service providers publication. Okay, service provider role. I just wanted to highlight how you guys as providers can aid in this interactive process that's hopefully occurring between an individual with a medical issue and their employer. You guys are a vital part of determining those restrictions and limitations and really weighing in on the functional limitations and providing that information on the supporting medical documentation. You guys are often a liaison between the employee and employer, so you guys can facilitate that communication, which we encourage, keeping everyone on the same page and everyone informed. Y'all are often in a better position to inform clients of their rights under the ADA and their laws. And often, of course, you guys know the best resources to connect to and how to gather relevant information. Employers often don't know what's available or where to turn. And it's evident since you guys are with us today. Hopefully you've already or will now use the Job Accommodation Network when you need additional help. Okay, so now we do want to get into some accommodation ideas for various limitations stemming from various medical conditions or disability. Again, these limitations could stem from disabilities from birth, or some could be some acquired injuries and illnesses. Okay, the first type of accommodation, absent hardship, is that an employer must consider purchasing or modifying work-related equipment or products. This accommodation is pretty clear-cut for most employers, but sometimes it's hard for them to keep up on all the products that are available. This is where Jan can help. We have extensive knowledge about modifying equipment an employer might already have, as well as information where to purchase new products. So looking at an example, an HR rep called us looking for ways to accommodate an employee. They were originally a respiratory therapist, but since having a stroke, they now have hand tremors. So doing certain medical procedures is hard for them. So now the company is looking at reassignment to a new role, one in the sleep lab, but was worried about the employee's ability to perform the computer tasks in the sleep lab. Jan referred the employer to multiple vendors for mouse adapters. There are tremor limiting mice on the market and large button keyboards with key guards that help fingers on top of the button you're trying to strike. We pushed out a vendor list for speech recognition software. And again, Jan doesn't recommend or endorse any one product. We just provide information on the products that we know exist and let you guys as the callers make the determinations. Now we have a broker who wasn't meeting production standards because they had a hard time typing due to finger numbness. After speaking with a Jan consultant, the employer did end up providing word prediction software for the time being, but now understood the use of speech recognition software for the future if need be. So how do you know what type of assistive technology to get? I mentioned talking to the employee. They often know what they need, oftentimes have past work experience to pull from. You want to make IT your friend. They are good with technology and can bridge that compatibility gap with company databases and the systems, like I mentioned. Consult with specialists, either healthcare or technology specialists, and then of course, Jan. So each state does have state assistive technology projects. So mainly each project has 4 kind of focuses. So a lot of them do have these demonstration programs. So these are opportunities for people to become familiar with specific types of AT by comparing and contrasting functions and features before your employer makes that investment. They have loan devices. So you can borrow AT for a limited time to try it out, oftentimes take it to your workplace and see if it is compatible with your work site before a purchase is made. Reutilization, the reuse of assistive technology that's no longer needed or used by its original owner, substantial cost savings there. and then state financing. These are the low cost or no cost loans made available to people with disabilities to help alleviate the financial burden some of these products may cause. And on our website, we do have a running list of state assistive technology contact information. So even more AT information, Agribility, a good resource for the farmers, ranchers, and other agricultural workers with disabilities. AT conferences. I know we always go to ATIA down in Orlando and CSUN in Anaheim. The CAP program, that's the Computer and Electronics Accommodation Program. They actually physically furnish computer accommodations for the Department of Defense agency. The Helen Keller National Center, they provide training and resources exclusively to those 16 and over who have combined vision and hearing loss. And Winover State AT projects. And then RESNA, we love the rehab engineers in North America for the custom equipment ideas and those tailored products. Okay, another type of accommodation is making the workplace accessible. Employers need to make sure that all employees are able to get in and out of the workplace and use those common areas such as restrooms, break rooms, exercise rooms. When picturing worksite accessibility, you always think of a wheelchair ramp into an entrance. Something people don't really think about too often is the air quality. We want to be mindful of the people with chemical and fragrance sensitivities and chemical allergies. They too need equal benefits to those areas. So really just remember that accessibility is really fully encompassing for all types of limitations. So here, our example, we have a college professor who had leg weakness, therefore had trouble walking long distances. The employer assigned the employee to a dedicated building so they weren't trekking all over campus. And the employer also installed handrails throughout that one building to help the individual walk. Okay, now we have a new hire, happened to be in a wheelchair, and noticed that the break room was 3 steps leading down into it. The new hire mentioned it to the employer, so the employer ended up calling us to learn what next steps should be. Here, Jan explained accessibility rules for employees under Title I, and they ended up moving that break room for all employees, and they lowered the microwave and soap dispensers. This created a more inclusive workplace and was effective for the new hire. And the employer ended up reporting spending a one-time cost of $500, increased diversity, and retained a valued employee. Next type of accommodation is job restructuring. Could mean a couple things. Oftentimes it's removing or reallocating marginal tasks, which are those secondary duties. It could be changing how or when either essential or marginal functions are performed. So one important thing employers should do is sort out what functions are considered essential and what are considered marginal in any specific job role. So looking at an example, we have a secretary had weakness and pain in her hands, so she couldn't lift the packages that were being delivered. So for the accommodation, the employer assigned another worker to catch those deliveries and get them where they needed to be. So this enabled that secretary to still be productive, so she wasn't working in pain from that lifting. Now we have a custodian who worked at a county government. He had balance and gait issues. So he had a hard time doing his job of general building maintenance, of emptying trash, sweeping, working outside. Here, the employer permitted him to use a motorized cart to carry trash bins and was able to use a riding floor polisher so he could just sit in the seat and the balance and gait issues weren't as prevalent. Another basic accommodation has to do with modifying schedules or allowing leave time. We get a lot of questions about how much leave time employers have to provide. I can also tell you that there's not a definite time frame under the ADA. That's going to be that case-by-case determination. So we can help employers discuss options and undue hardship issues, suggesting in some cases alternatives to leave, And we can provide some general information about related laws such as workers' comp and the Family and Medical Leave Act, FMLA. So looking at an example for a modified schedule, we have an employee who works in a call center who has a GI disorder and has to take frequent restroom breaks. Productivity is measured by the number of calls taken. Lots of times that is the situation in a call center. So he asked his employer to allow him to take all the breaks he needed and exempt him from meeting the productivity standards. So like I said earlier, employers don't have to lower production standards as an accommodation. So here the employer denied the request, but contacted us to see if there might be other alternatives. We were able to give the employer some ideas that the employer was able to use. They did continue to require the employee to meet production standards, but moved him closer to the bathroom and allowed him to have flexible breaks and to make up the time for any breaks taken beyond what all employees were entitled to. So with those accommodations in place, they were able to meet the production standards. I included this because it illustrates a typical situation. It also demonstrates an important requirement of the ADA. So just because an employer can't provide the accommodation that the person requested doesn't mean that's the end of the employer's obligation. Like the employer in the example, employers should enter into that interactive process and work with the individual and outside resources to come up with other accommodation ideas. Otherwise, the employer may be guilty of failing to provide an accommodation under the ADA. Okay, now we have a construction worker who had depression stemming from another underlying medical condition. The employer permitted ADA leave while the worker got treatment, and then once he was cleared to return to work, he was given a reduced schedule to slowly transition back to full time. Now we have an office manager with a rare disorder plus depression. She was slacking at work with her deadlines. She couldn't stay focused and struggled with her assignments. She brought it up to her supervisor, which was a good tactic as you don't want to wait until it's too late to ask for accommodations. You don't want performance to suffer before you make a request. So her and the supervisor discussed the issues. The employer did give the employee time to call her support people. In this case, it was friends and family, but sometimes that may look like calling a therapist or a counselor. So with this individual calling her friends and family during her periodic breaks, this did help her regroup and in turn increase productivity. Now we have a concierge at a resort, must have been out on leave, and now they want to return to work, but with limited hours to start off, and they want to use their cane. So after talking to the employer, Jan did suggest the use of a stool to help with those walking issues, extra breaks when needed, and then also that modifying schedule. We also went over removing non-essential functions so they were focused their time and energy on the essential functions with the hours that they were working. And then we did explain the basic principles of FMLA. I do want to briefly mention reassignment. Typically, reassignment is the accommodation of last resort. Employers should be focused on accommodating the original role unless both the individual and the employer decide that jumping to reassignment is the most effective option. So the example now is an employer with spinal cord injury. They used public transportation to get to work. Well, then of course that bus route changed and that was a big issue for the individual. So the employer ended up calling Jan for their commute obligations and accommodation ideas. So after learning that yes, an employer doesn't physically have to transport employees to work unless they do so for everybody, an employer may have to change the location of work when an employee can't commute due to a disability. So here the employer reassigned the employee to another work site that was along a bus route that was effective for the individual. Okay, so that wraps up the situation and solutions. This is the home page. I put a yellow circle around the new Corona page. Everything will be linked there and updated. You'll also see the A to Z page with the yellow arrow to it. And then live chat is linked on this home page. And we're still teleworking here at Jan. So we're kind of changing the way we talk to clients. You can definitely still call us at the 800 number, but the quickest way to get in touch with someone is going to be live chatting from the homepage or sending us an email to jan@askjan.org. But if you prefer to speak on the phone, don't hesitate to call that 800 number, leave a detailed message, and someone will call you back and can go from there. So I'm going to open up the chat and see if there's any questions and answers. Let's see. How to ask for an accommodation in a work from home world. I mean, my suggestion is always going to be put it in writing. So that can be an email in this day and age. So really, I would draft up an email and send it to, it is going to differ. 9 times out of 10, HR has their hand in accommodation. So I would CC HR, because sometimes individuals want their supervisor in on the loop and they don't want to feel like they're going behind the supervisor's back. So I would draft up an email and send it to HR and CC the immediate supervisor and request it that way. Because yeah, an employer needs to be considering accommodations for us that are teleworking, basically still engaging in that interactive process like we were pre-COVID. EEOC guidance has said if an employee needs the same accommodation they had from the work site, that they need that accommodation now at home, an employer should be giving that absent hardship. Karen said, consult with an occupational therapist. Yes, absolutely. Love them. Oh, perfect. Occupational therapists are certified in assistive technology and aging in place for mobility. Okay, Vermont Occupational Therapy Association. That sounds like an amazing resource. Okay, are there any other questions? I have a few minutes, I'm available. I want to thank Freddie and the Reeves Foundation for inviting us back today. Thank you.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks again for being here. I do want to say, Karen, thank you for that comment. That's always good information to know. I will follow up with all attendees from today's session, and I will also include that comment, Karen, that you've included in there. Lisa, thank you again for a wonderful presentation. I do have one question for you, Lisa, and that is, have you seen the number of inquiries through the Job Accommodation Network go up during this time of COVID? Just, you know, some general comments about that as being on the inside from the Jan perspective.
Yeah, we actually had a company meeting today on Zoom, and that was brought up. And really, we're still dealing with the same number of clients, but we have kind of seen an uptick because it used to be like 55% were employers and 45 were individuals. Well, now that's kind of flipped, where now individuals are now the majority, ranging from 55 even up to 60 kind of during that March, April timeframe. And employers were the, you know, minority, being at 40%, still a huge chunk, but yeah, it kind of flipped, where individuals, which isn't surprising because especially that March, April timeframe, everyone was like wanting to request telework as an accommodation to avoid exposure, you know, before it was like mandated.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, well, I want to thank you, Lisa, again for being here. I want to thank all the attendees for coming out. I hope everyone is safe during these times. And please share the link that I will be sending out by the end of this week to all attendees to your respective networks, communities, organizations. And again, please reach out to Lisa if you have any questions related to Jan, or you can reach out to me. I put my email address on the chat, but I will also follow up with everyone on email if you have any questions related to the Paralysis Resource Center. Thank you, everyone. Take care, and we'll be in touch.